Hello there, I'm Dimitra Fimi. I'm Professor of Fantasy and Children's Literature here at the University of Glasgow, and I'm also co-convenor of the Fantasy MLitt programme.
And my name's Dr. Will Tatterstill. I'm the other co-convenor of the Fantasy MLitt, and I'm Senior Lecturer in Literature and Contemporary Fantasy Cultures. So at Glasgow, we're very proud to have what we think is the only master's course in the world that is exclusively focused on fantasy literature. It's the jewel in the crown of the Centre for Fantasy and the Fantastic, which Dimitra will tell you about in a minute. And it is the centerpiece of a large community we have of researching and teaching fantasy literature across the university. So on this slide, you can see the things that you have to do if you take this course. So the core of it is these two not optional courses, Fantasy 1 and 2, that run either side of Christmas, and broadly speaking are designed to introduce students to fantasy from about 1780 to the present day. It's changed a lot during that time. These courses can only scratch the surface of what's been done with the genre over that amount of time, but our hope is to give everyone some common ground, to introduce some common approaches to the subject, and to broaden the horizons of anybody perhaps who's coming in with a very niche view in terms of period or author of what it is that fantasy can do. On top of that, we have the research training course. Every literature master's student takes that, so this is not a fantasy specific course, it's a research skills course, and it's designed to give you the practical skills that you need to do the fourth and final of these compulsory courses, which is the dissertation. The dissertation is the last and the biggest and the most independent thing that you will do here. You'll do it on any subject related to any aspect of fantasy. You choose it yourself. You may have ideas already. You might develop those ideas across taking the other courses in conversation with staff and with other students. You'll be supervised, but ultimately this is something that you will execute yourself, and it will be the pinnacle of your work here with us. So alongside those compulsory courses, you also take 3 optional courses, and it's important to say that the ones listed on these slides is just a suggestion of the sorts of things. The actual offering changes a little bit year on year. It's also a lot bigger than this slide makes it look, because we've tried to pick the fantasy kind of specific ones, but you can in principle do courses from a much wider range of options offered by the entire school and indeed the college. Most of our students though go with the ones that are kind of designed for fantasy students. We've got fantasy across media, which is sort of transmedia exploration of what fantasy does in different formats, whether that's TV or film, but also board games, video games, TTRPGs, things like that. There's a children's fantasy literature course which speaks for itself, world building, which is the one I run, and surprisingly enough is about building of worlds. A course run by our medievalist colleagues looking at the deeper prehistory of fantasy in the medieval period. And lots of our students too choose to do a creative writing option. That's not a fantasy specific course, but many of our students are interested in the writing of fantasy as well as in the reading of it, and so that's important for them as well. Important to restate that this is just a selection of what we offer, and it's correct at the moment I make this video, but we do change these offerings year on year. The way we teach will be familiar to you if you are doing your undergraduate degree in the UK, although if that's the case, you might be expecting more lectures than we have. It is almost entirely, we do have a couple of lectures still, but it's almost entirely small group seminars and workshops is how we teach. So by small group there, that's usually between 10 and 15 students. And if you're less familiar with the UK education system, what that means is you and other people who have read the text or done the work for that week, sitting in a classroom talking about it for usually 2 hours. Some seminars are slightly shorter than that. The point of the seminar format is really that we're all learning from each other. I consider myself one of the learners in that room when I'm leading those conversations. And so we are sharing our knowledge and love of the fantasy genre and developing together different questions to ask about it, questions that we might then pursue separately in our own individual research and writing. That individual research and writing, as I said before, is building to the dissertation, and that's where we do have a bit of one-to-one supervision. But it's really important to stress that this is, like most master's degrees in the humanities in the UK, this is a programme that's really designed to develop you as an independent scholar, and you'll be doing a lot of work in the library and in your own workspaces by yourself as well, in kind of developing your approaches. We've got an extracurricular programme that is tied to the Centre for Fantasy and the Fantastic. We're really proud of that. We consider that community a big reason to come and study with us. It's one of the main reasons this is an in-person programme. So I'm going to turn over to Dimitra now, and she's going to say a little bit more about that.
As students of the Fantasy MLitt programme, you will also have the opportunity to take part in a number of different activities organised by the Centre for Fantasy and the Fantastic. This is our research centre on fantasy here at Glasgow that brings together researchers, PhD students, all of you master students as well as collaborations with stakeholders outside academia, including writers, creative practitioners more generally, artists and fan communities as well. So the centre organises a number of different public-facing events, conferences and other opportunities that students can get involved with. The centre does far too many things that I cannot really list here in detail, but one thing I want to draw your attention to is our annual conference, Glasgow International Fantasy Conversations, or GIFCON, which is run by postgraduate students, and MLitt students are very much involved in it and often present their first paper. This is an international conference. We've had keynotes by amazing writers such as the ones you see on this slide here, Amal El-Mokhtar, Marjorie Liu, Shia Jha, and many other academics as well that come and present to us. So this is an opportunity to get involved with a conference already in your year here with us. One more thing that is worth talking about is what our graduates have got to do after they finished with this programme with us, and it's absolutely lovely to follow their trajectories and their career paths. So we've had alumni that have gone into many different areas of work or of research. We've had students who've gone into teaching. We've got students who have gone into the heritage sector, including museums and galleries. We've also had a lot of students that have been involved in the publishing industry, including as editors and agents. And there's also a portion of students that want to continue with the research that they've started here with us and have gone on to do PhDs, either here with us at the University of Glasgow, and they're now part of our centre community, or in other universities all over the world.
It's really, really difficult in a presentation like this to put across the love that we have for this programme, for its students and for the subjects that we get to talk about. Something that separates fantasy criticism perhaps a little bit from wider literary criticism is that its practitioners tend to feel a bit more personally involved in it, tend to have fanish aspirations or tendencies of their own, even while they're capable of, as most fans are, having intense, deep, critical conversations with the subject matter and with the people who write it. None of that comes across in a presentation like this, but it is the key thing about working here, and it's why it's such a joy. The last thing to talk about just before I go is how you apply. The full details for this are on the website, and perhaps you've already seen them. From my perspective as admissions tutor, there are two bits of the application that are particularly important. The first is a personal statement. It's not particularly high stakes personal statements, but what we're looking for in that is to give you an opportunity to tell your story about why you want to come and study with us. It's really important to us that we get to know our students as individuals as quickly as possible. This is not a big program. It's usually about 20 students in a year. So we do forge quite close relationships with most of the students who come and do it. The more important thing, though, is the academic writing sample. By far the most common question I get about this is about whether the academic writing that you submit has to be about fantasy. The answer to that is no, it doesn't. We recognise that worldwide not every undergraduate programme gives its students an opportunity to write about fantasy literature for assessment. What we want to see is not that you can write about fantasy, but that you can write academic prose. So we're looking particularly for skill with a referencing system, with an ability to pursue an argument rigorously, to write clearly and cleanly. Those are the skills we need you to have already. If you've got them, you're almost certainly coming here. So that is how it works as far as we're concerned. You don't have to prove that you're already an expert in fantasy. That, if you like, is what we're for. Or if you've got something about fantasy already, by all means, let's see it. But what we're really looking for in that admissions process is to make sure that you have the academic writing skills that you'll need to make the most out of your time here. There's one thing more that it's worth saying. Although criticism and writing in fantasy are often very close together, as I said earlier in this slide, they're not the same thing. Every year we get a few applications from people who seem to think that this is a creative writing degree, a degree that's going to teach you how to write fantasy. That's not quite what we do, although the skills we teach, I think, are useful to aspiring fantasy writers, and many of our students are aspiring fantasy writers. This is not something where you'll be, for the most part, writing and submitting creative work. This is a critical degree. It's a literary criticism master's program. So with that in mind, if we're sounding good to you, please do send an application to me. I'm really excited whenever one hits my inbox, and hope very much to hear from you soon. The central admissions team have all kinds of ways that you can find out more, hear more about this process, and they're all displayed on the slide here, and I recommend every single one of them. It's also worth saying that you're welcome to email me individually. You can find my email address on the website if you have any specific questions about the program or your suitability for it. I'm pretty good at replying within a few days mostly, so reach out and get in touch if you're interested in applying for this program, and I hope to hear from you soon.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am joined right now by Professor Dimitra Fimi, one of the Fantasy MLitt co-conveners. Thank you for joining us, Dimitra.
Oh, great to be here.
If you've got any questions for Dimitra, please pop them in the chat. But in the meantime, I've got a few questions of my own. In no small part because I am obsessed with fantasy, and I personally have FOMO every time I hear what the MLitt students and the rest of the fantasy are getting up to. And I suppose first and foremost, Dimitra, you mentioned GIFCon in the presentation, and I believe that's happening right now.
It is happening right now. We're in the second day of GIFCon. GIFCon is usually a 3-day symposium conference that's been happening online for a good few years now, and we're in the midst of it. We've just had our second keynote, and there's workshops and presentations happening right now. This is a free conference. It's open to anybody anywhere in the world. So if you're just finding out about all of this, there's still time to quickly register and catch the end of it if you'd like to get a sense of what, for example, our students have been doing or the kind of conversations. The theme this year is queering the fantastic, but there's been all sorts of different themes through the years. And if you access the centre's YouTube channel, you can find keynotes from previous GIFCons as well as different presentations.
Brilliant, thank you. And if my magical YouTube moderator could pop some links into the chat for that, that would be amazing. And we actually have a question in the chat here. Great. So Dimitra, we're being asked, what will the assignments look like for the core courses? Will the essay questions be given, or will we be able to think of our own subjects or theses? Fantastic question.
Yeah, great questions, absolutely. So with Fantasy 1 and 2, which are our core courses, the pattern is that there's usually a short presentation, and that is a 10-minute presentation, individual presentations, and these happen throughout the semester, and we divvy those up at the beginning, and these have a small percentage, they take a small percentage of the overall weighting for the course grade. Then the two bigger pieces of assessment is a midterm, which is a very Glasgow, Scottish educational system term, isn't it? The midterm essay, which is a shorter essay of about 1,500 words, and then there is a final essay, which is double that, really, and that's at the end of the semester. So usually the idea is that you sort of try your hand with a particular text, with a particular critical approach, with a particular sort of set of questions or ways of thinking about the texts, and then you have a go at a larger research question really at the end of the semester. So both for Fantasy 1 and 2 work that way. The questions are not set, right? And again, this is not unusual for a master's level course in any UK university, really. The idea is that you come up with your own research question, but you're not left to your own devices completely. We have office hours every week. So when I teach Fantasy 1, for example, I have that office hour a week, and people can come in and have a chat with me, and we can formulate the essay question together. Sometimes people come to me with 2 or 3 different ideas, and I say, yeah, that one sounds like it's got legs, that one sounds like it's too big or too small. So we have this conversation and we work together, and you're not completely left to yourselves. But the idea is that you are becoming an independent researcher, really. So it's your research interests that we want to center this around.
Great.
I hope that helps.
That's great. Thank you, Dimitra. If there are any more questions, please do pop them in the chat. But I think this brings me nicely onto a question that I've got. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit about the teaching space that the students will get to be in when they join us in September.
Sure. So I'm sure people who are researching the University of Glasgow will have seen that we have some lovely Gothic buildings, lovely architecture, especially the historical campus. So a lot of the teaching of the Fantasy MLitt happens on a part of the campus called University Gardens, which is a series of late Victorian and Edwardian houses, really. So some of the rooms you can see how, you know, they used to be like a drawing room or a parlor or whatever. You can see the sort of the old fireplaces have been boarded up, etc. So usually it's different rooms like that throughout the campus. But with a fantasy provision, we actually have a bespoke room that we use most of the time, and that is a room on 4 University Gardens on the 3rd floor. Again, one of those lovely Edwardian buildings. And we've named it, so we call it the Weatherwax Room, and that comes from, of course, the Granny Weatherwax in Terry Pratchett's books. And the big difference there is it's not just a teaching space in the sense that, you know, there is a board and there's AV equipment and tables, etc. We actually have our bespoke collections that belong to the center in there. So there's a collection of Tolkien scholarship, about 250 books on Tolkien that have been donated as a collection to the center, and that is kept in there. And our students are free to use any of those books. So these are not part of a library, they are our own collections. And the other one is an extensive collection of science fiction and fantasy magazines from the early 20th century all the way to very, very recently. So again, we've been very privileged to have had these scholarly donations, and they're kept together in that room. So it's both a resource and a teaching space, and it's more personalized, I suppose, than other spaces in the university.
Great, thank you. And obviously, I've said previously to Dimitra that I personally want to get into this space myself because it sounds brilliant. But obviously, the university, we've got the Centre for Fantasy and the Fantastic, and as well as GIFCON and this amazing space that you get to teach and learn in, you've got what I think is one of the most thriving research communities we have on the campus.
We have about 25 to 30 PhD students working with us on fantasy at the moment, which is tremendous, really, if you think about, you know, yeah, I mean, there are PhD students doing fantasy elsewhere, but they tend to be in smaller groups or, you know, quite isolated, actually. That's where GIFCON is quite good as well. It brings that international community together.
And you've had some other events this year as well, haven't you? Do you want to mention some of those, Dimitra?
Yes, so we've had one of the things that the centre does, or part of our activities, is a book series. So that's the Bloomsbury academic book series called Perspectives on Fantasy, and that's the only bespoke academic book series on fantasy. And that's, you know, again, that's why, you know, we felt there was a need for that. There was no specific series that would publish monographs and edited collections on fantasy. So whenever we have a few new books, actually there's the latest one literally arrived, my hard copy just arrived, which is the Discworld book, Power and Society in Terry Pratchett's Discworld, which is an edited collection. So there you see the perspectives title really here. So every year we have a couple of new books out, so we launch them and we have the authors come to talk about the work that they have done. So we've had one of those this year. We've also have lots of public engagement, sort of things that open up conversations about how fantasy can contribute to society, how does it respond to the world around us. So one of the big events we had this year was at the anniversary of the war with Ukraine, and we had actually a group of Ukrainian academics who work on fantasy talk to us about how has it been reading fantasy, teaching about fantasy in the midst of war, because fantasy does talk about war a lot. You know, there's so many texts where there's huge geopolitical conflicts happening, or even smaller stories where, you know, we get to hear about the trauma of war, for example. So it was an amazing conversation, hearing from people on the ground, so to speak, including a writer as well, about how all of that is, you know, is being shaped by conflict in a contemporary context.
Great, thank you. So lots of things that our students can get involved in throughout the year, especially when they join us in September. I may be jumping the gun a little bit here, but thinking about graduation, is there anything that you do to celebrate that and mark that, especially for your students?
Oh, yes, sure. So graduation, so the program is September to August, really. So you come here in September. By the end of August, usually maybe first few days of the following September, you've submitted your dissertation. And then by October, you've got your results. And then December is the graduation. So you get a nice winter graduation. Sometimes, if we're lucky, we get snow in that graduation, which means that you have a lovely photo. I mean, the lovely photographs of campus are always lovely, whatever the weather, but the snow is extra special when we get it. So it's lovely to always see, you know, our students cross the stage. It's again beautiful venue with sort of pre-Raphaelite stained glass and all sorts. But apart from all of that, and of course we all get together afterwards when we have a nice drink and a reception. But apart from that, the other thing that we do to mark this is that we plant a tree for each of you. So for each student that graduates, we plant a tree in the Highlands, and that's a project called the Imminent Grove. And those of you who know the Ursula Le Guin Earthsea books will know the magical forest, you know, the imminent grove that moves around. And that's how we've named this particular sort of collection of trees, each one of them named and dedicated to one of our each one of our graduates. So yeah, there's a lot more on that on the website. I'll see if I can find the link to the project. Actually, there we go. I think I've got it here, but I'm not sure how to post that. See, I might put it in our chat, and if you can copy from there, that would be great.
Oh,
but that explains how the idea came together, because of course one of the big themes in fantasy literature is the environment, right? The natural world, trees, you know, trees that move, trees that talk, trees that, you know, have a different kind of existence and get us to think differently about the natural world. So there is a whole strand of us who are interested in eco-criticism, environmental studies, energy humanities, you know, all of these entanglements between fantasy and the fantastic and the world around us, especially at a time of crisis, as we're going through at the moment.
Definitely. So we put the link in the chat for you all there, so please do take a look. I think we're coming up to the end of this session, so if you have any more questions for Dimitra, please pop them in the chat. I have another question. I always have questions about fantasy. It's always a treat for me when I get to chat to Dimitra and some of her colleagues. And recently, your colleague Will had a live Q&A with some of our students, Sage and Michaela. And one of the questions that came up for them, and I'm going to pose it to you now, so thank you to whoever asked that a few weeks ago, is if there was maybe one text, which I know is a mean question to ask, if there's one text you recommend students read before joining in September, what would you suggest?
Oh, I'm going to be very practical about that. I would suggest you read the big ones. Get one of the big ones out of the way so that you can have your workload a bit less sort of pressed. We are doing sometimes more than one text per week, although we try to keep the workload manageable. So sometimes you'll have 2 or 3 texts, but then they might be short stories, right? We don't give you more than one novel a week, for example, but there are some novels that are bigger than others. So if you haven't read The Lord of the Rings, read The Lord of the Rings if you can. The other big one is Titus Groan, which is the first novel of the Gormenghast series. So these are the 2 bigger ones. And I would say if you want to do preparation, get on with those, because they come towards the middle and end of the semester. And that's the point where people are thinking about essays and getting worried. I mean, to be honest, a lot of the time people come to us having read one of those already. But if not, and you want to definitely get ahead, that's probably what I would suggest.
Thank you very much. And if anyone has any questions, I believe we put Will's email address in the chat.
Will's is the admissions person at the moment. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Okay then, so I think that brings us to the end of the session. So yeah, please do pop more questions in the chat if you have any, and obviously send them along to Will as well. And all that leaves me to say is thank you very much to Dimitra for joining me.
Thank you, and thank you all for the questions, and looking forward to seeing you at Glasgow.
Thanks, everybody.